So I'll say hello, I'm Lindsay from the Longmeadow Adult Center, and I am so pleased to welcome Fred Sokol, a local author of Destiny, and I will let you take it from here, Fred.
Thank you, Lindsay. Everybody on the screen knows me pretty well, except for Anne. Hi, Anne. Hello. Well, so I'm trying to figure out just how to go forward with this. Since Anne doesn't, I'm going to assume Anne does not know this book yet. And so my plan today was to read as in kind of a sampling of hors d'oeuvres of the book, a variety of little segments to just kind of get people acquainted with the characters, because somebody recently said, what's best about this book are the characters and the dialogue. That's what I love. So given the fact that I always hope that characters drive plot, I thought I'd try to read into some of the characters. And even though you guys mostly know the characters, Lindsay, you don't know the characters, right? So this will be for you too. So, you know, this is the second in a series of Mendel and Morris's books. The first one was called actually Mendel and Morris. This is the sequel called Destiny, and it introduces Destiny and other people who were not in the first book. But to begin the session off, I thought I'd just read a little about from Mendel. Mendel lurched forward with a creak. Having been so consumed with his footwork in order to avoid toppling over, he was oblivious to claps of thunder until this very moment. Suddenly, the skies opened above with a monsoon and drenched him. He looked up and saw a graceful, watchful bird sitting on a branch near the top of a tree. Herring, blue herring, he queried. The bird flew lower, temporarily swooping close to him. You don't speak, and I have to tell you, having seen you skimming along more than one of the park ponds, I think you are mute. What do you say to that? The blue wild heron spread its wings, and as it dropped even closer to Mendel, with a whoosh, it took off with a great thrust. Don't say goodbye, but I will say certain people say too much. Better off being silent. Anyway, I will miss you. And that's the first little tidbit. It's about Mendel wandering in Forest Park, coming across a heron and his reaction. The second segment begins with Morris saying to his buddy of many years, Mendel, it's getting late. The sun's down. You must be a bit chilled, colder than I am, and not one woman is here. I know you got to think for girls younger than you, like that Lucy, but there's nothing doing here. Gilda and Zena should be fine for dinner, and as for me, I could go eat. You ready to go? Mendel nodded. The boys gathered a couple of towels they had spread on the ground and slowly ambled toward the car. They opened doors almost in unison, sat down in silence, and each slumped into a seat. Mendel said, I'm tired, Morris. I'm bushed. You want to drive this newfangled machine? You do remember that I have a lead foot. If it's okay with you, the Prius will get tested. Sure, I'll drive, said Morris. Where to? Food, said Mendel. And the third section that I've noted introduces the character of Annie. Annie's, well, I'll just let it speak for itself. Annie grew up with dogs, cats, chickens, and roosters. It wasn't until a year into their friendship that Destiny and Annie discovered each had attended the same high school, albeit during different eras, 10 years or so apart. Annabelle was raised more or less in the Massachusetts woods, off Route 2, not all that far from Walden Pond. Dogs were friends, forever and unconditionally. You didn't sign or form a contract. There weren't any rules, and trust would never become an issue. Annie loved her 2 dogs, and when they died, she would get others. She felt she needed dogs in order to be whole. Dogs and jazz. Welcome, newcomer, to this reading presentation conversation. And here we have Destiny, and the title of this book is Destiny. It was a full decade after she opened that a couple of old Jewish men showed up at her door. They liked her pancakes, her guitar, her candles, and the larger of the two talked about her scene. He had asked for seconds and even thirds. The wiry frowner, on the other hand, picked at his food, eating the blueberries but little else. Now they were coming back with their girlfriends and someone else. Destiny wondered what this meant and how these guys could possibly appeal to, well, anyone, let alone women. Anticipating their arrival, Destiny dusted, cleaned around the candle holders, all the window shades, the tables and the chairs, the low round coffee table. She even fluffed the pillows, and she swept and gathered sand in piles at either door, then scattered spare grains back onto the beach. She cleaned windows and mirrors with the wet rags, and she could not tolerate even the faintest scent of Windex. Then she needed to pick pieces of white lint off the glass surfaces. The building grew warmer, even more enveloping. Destiny wondered whether it was beginning to sparkle. If so, this could actually become worrisome, because Destiny thought the appeal of her place relied heavily on its charm. It was cozy, welcoming. Destiny wanted it to feel lived in, like a home, like her home. It was a place of business, but one where everyone would be able to relax and remain in conversation for a while. She even posted a sign outside that read, "This restaurant remains a haven from society's hurried race. Those who enter will not be asked to leave. Stay, wait, and then stay." So there's another relationship in this book that a few people have brought up, and one person has actually asked me to consider writing a novel to expand this relationship, and I initially balked, and now, of course, I'm mulling that over. So Kylie was quite capable of standing ramrod straight, or at least what he assumed to be vertical. At the same time, he treasured the young woman's assisting touch, since he hadn't experienced anything like that in quite some time. He leaned on her, pretending to require support. When Annie looked at him, however, she saw that his lips were gently upturned, as if he were striving ever slightly to camouflage a smile. "Go ahead, admit it," she said to him. "No contest," said Kylie. "You have the gift, the fingers of a sorceress." "I can't say anyone's given me that title, so I'll take it as a compliment. I never thought of myself as a woman of mystery," she replied. Couple more. Everybody's on the scene here. We're getting towards the end of the book. "I cannot believe that this Kylie, some big shot who pretends he is a living end, who is finding religion, whatever that is, thinks that sweet wisp of a girl will sleep with him," said Zena. "Listen," said Morris, wolfing down a bagel covered with mounds of cream cheese. "The man's entitled. When was the last time you think for him? We are not going to have some discussion of sex after 75. No, you and your AARP magazine can go sit in a corner. Amuse." And finally, a passage that I read at my last reading, and it's Mendel writing in his diary. "When you get old, everything shrinks, your bones, your hair, your brain, and the jewels below your belt too. But more than that, your world compresses and you are stuck inside. It feels like you're pressing against those cartoon walls, the ones you can push and pull like an elastic. You can breathe, but you can never get any fresh air. Some people, of course, think this is ideal. After all, you can become a recycling maven. So it is when 4 old goats like us try to plan a wedding list. We make a big fat discovery. We got no one to invite. Some are dead. Others have no energy to get up and do a damn thing. Those that still have some fire probably live in Florida or Arizona or California or even North Carolina, for God's sake. What the hell? Maybe we shouldn't even let them know. And there you have kind of a sampling from Destiny to acquaint you with some of the characters at different parts in the book. It started out being about the same old kind of guys that I featured for a long time in Mendel and Morris. And I kind of spun the plot in various directions and managed to introduce new and different types of characters. I have a lot more to say about it, but I thought I'd open it up to any questions or comments before I do that.
Can I jump in? I have some questions for Fred, and just to be open about it. I'm a friend of Fred's, and have enjoyed his writing a lot. Fred, one of the things that interested me about this book is that you wrote about aging, and you wrote about older people that are older than you are, and you wrote about them with a lot of humor, and you also wrote about romance amongst older people. What's it like to kind of imagine what for you is still another state, another phase of life that you actually haven't quite gotten to yet?
Tom and everybody else, I'll wait till Michelle is here in the picture. So I actually began Mendel and Morris as a short story in approximately 1980, when I was much younger, writing about a generation which was much, much older. And I told this story last time, but one of our sons commented that, said something like, "Yeah, Dad, these are old guys when you started the book, and guess what? You're fast approaching." So, I mean, it was a very different experience to write about them when I was a much younger person than it is to rewrite and think about them and expand their lives as somebody who's, yes, several years away from that kind of stage of life. But I think about it very much differently than I did then. What's in common is that I was aware that I was writing about my father's generation. And the voices that I heard were those of my father, while neither of these characters is my father. The language and the disposition was of that generation. And so that in many ways, I feel like I'm trying to honor that generation. And while some people have said, how can you write about these guys who are sexist? Well, the answer is they were. But not, I don't think in a mean-spirited way. And I'm trying to find their endearing love-hate qualities for one another and for other people. They're complicated. And, I found them, as I said, initially through my dad's voice, but also in my own mind, and then wandering about South Florida, in and out of that milieu for 30-something years, where my parents lived, and where many, many folks who were from initially the New York metropolitan area moved. And I thought to myself, my goodness, these guys are all, men and women, are all down here. In fact, there's my dentist, which was true. So, it's all a matter of finding them for me and listening to them. And I know this is a long-winded answer, but kind of getting not only their voice, but the lens that they saw life. Been thinking about lenses a lot lately. You know, how do you see life? And how, as a writer, can I get into the lens of these characters? So, okay, that's enough for that answer, I guess. Is that helpful at all, or it's a little off topic, I guess? But.
Oh, well, it's great. I mean, I'm always interested in where, fiction writers get their characters from. So if I could just ask one more question, it's like, okay, so I see where Mendel Morris and the Lewis sisters came from. Where did these other people come from? How did you get Destiny and Annie and Kylie and all these other folks?
Um, I'll answer about Destiny and Annie first, because I know, as a younger person, and Tom, I know Tom, as Tom said, we know each other for a multitude of decades. Let's put it that way. That, as I kind of came in of age myself during the late 1960s and all during the 1970s, there were various Earth Mother type women I knew. And not that I've replicated that in either Destiny or Annie, but I was influenced by that. And I thought to myself, they were galvanic life force type of people. And I wanted to find such people. From there on, I invented the characters. But I guess they were inspired by people I knew during that time in my life, I would say. And so the inspiration for Mendel and Morris came not from anybody that I knew who was like Mendel and Morris, but, for example, again, the South Florida business, wandering around the Springfield JCC for, a period of time and kind of listening. I think I've been a good observer and listener. As an arts journalist, one had to have those qualities, and that's what I was and am still. But you kind of have your ears and eyes open. So as a fiction writer, thinking about people that I knew and then spinning into other orbits. And now Kylie, I invented by myself. I don't think I know anybody like Kylie. Kylie, for those who are new to this, is a person who is not Jewish, who was taken with Judaism. He's an interesting guy. He's had many lives, and he's friends with Mendel and Morris. So, I think I invented him pretty much, though.
Fred, you said something in your answer just previous to this about how your characters view the world, and that was one of the things that really struck me when I first read the manuscript, and the perspective that Mendel and Morris each had of reflecting back on life and looking forward to what might be, and the differences that they have. And do you want to talk a little bit about that and sort of that diversity of how they saw their own lives? Because I thought that was a really important part of the story.
Well, thank you, Linda. Well, first of all, I should say to everybody that I consider both Mendel and Morris and Destiny to be books of optimism, of possibility and hope for people who are elderly and who are living on. So it's a statement to say that there's no reason why we can't enjoy a period of our life, the period of our life, the last quadrant, or whatever you want to call it. So that was what was in my mind. Now, I created Mendel as a contemplative soul, hence his wandering in the park, writing in diary. And for those kind of new to this program and new to my work, I've also written 2 plays that feature Mendel and Morris. One of them focusing more on Xena and Gilda. Nevertheless, Mendel's always considering throughout. He's trying to ponder. He's trying to figure out a way, and he recognizes that there are physical limitations. Somebody described this as an incredible Jewish vaudeville team. if that's true, Morris fits that category better than does Mendel. Because Morris, he's a great big guy. He's bumbling around. He likes to eat. He likes to proclaim. He kind of talks off the cuff. But I think both of the characters are searchers who are not dwelling within negativity. I think that they want to find a positiveness to this part of life. And there's some recollection throughout the various works of their youth and middle age, but it's more illusion, ALL, than it is illusion. It's not illusion, it's illusion. And it's, I've not gone into great depth because then I would have written books that are twice as long. And that was not my purpose here. Thanks for the questions. They're great, by the way.
How long would you say it took you to write the novel?
Well, that's a good question and a complicated question, because I began writing the novel a number of years before we even Mendel and Morris was self-published. Before that was self-published in 2011, I had already begun the sequel, but then I stopped. Life intrudes, things happen, and then I resumed, kind of probably because I was invigorated by the self-publication of Mendel and Morris, feeling like that's a statement, and I'm released to write some more. So I'm not that I can't measure it in terms of exact period that it took me to write. But I think what's really important is that some years ago, a few years ago, Linda of Bella Storia said that she wanted to publish the sequel. And it turns out that, with very good reason, this book needed a lot of editing. And we had a very good line editor and detail editor who did some of that work, did a very good job in that. And then I found that I spent a whole lot of time revisiting, responding to questions, whether large or small. And there was a lot of work to be done then. And I found that I re-immersed in the work at that point. And that point was, just really like in the spring, I think, as nearby as that period. And I had to really readjust. And I found a few things. First of all, I liked the book better than I thought I did. And secondly, I found a way to really enrich it. I just felt like, this is pretty good, and I can make it into a very good product if I respond to the suggestions, recommendations, and questions. And I did reject some of them as not being relevant or pertinent. But so that I began the book quite some time ago, went back to it, finished the manuscript, I thought, and in the process did some revising, but did think that I had a finished product, but it turned out that I did not have a finished product. It turned out that I really had to do quite a bit of work to get it to the point where it is now. And now, as I said at the very beginning of our program, I feel proud about it. I went through a period for a while, thinking like, really, is this any good? I mean, people have bought the book, but I don't know if this is any good at all. And now I've kind of come back to, feeling like, yeah, I think it is. It's not perfect. And and it's kind of a segue to something else, which is that I had showed promise as a writer like decades and decades ago. And in terms of being a creative writer, I simply did not get to it. I was too busy being a family member and a very proactive dad, and writing theater criticism for a million years, and directing community college and college plays and teaching full time and everything else. And in the back of my mind was, yeah, but a few people told you that you can really be a good writer, a good fiction writer. So when are you going to get to this? So for me, this happened after I was 60 years old. And that's, so I feel like I'm, it's kind of an evolution from 60 to whatever as a writer. And that's been recharged, I think, through the publication of both books and the plays that I've written as well. And by the way, the subsequent work that actually might be published and other projects have nothing to do with elderly Jewish men. So, we'll see where that goes.
Thank you.
Fred, do you want to tell us a little bit about the new book you're working on?
Sure, Linda. So I've written a novel which is called Summer of 65, and it's told from the perspective, voice, and view and lens, my new word these days, of a young woman who's 18 years old during the summer of 1965. And it takes place over 4 or 5 month period, and that's it. And, it's drawn from something in my life, but obviously I wasn't a young woman of 18 years old in 1965. But I latched onto that and an experience that I had at a place I was working. And from there on, it just went forward. I will tell you, this is a fun spoiler alert for that at least maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people will appreciate in this crowd, that she, growing up in the suburbs of New York, was nevertheless obsessed with Bob Cousy as a basketball player and wore his number 14 jersey all over the place. She loved playing basketball with her best friend next door. And even though she is from New York, she just couldn't get enough of Bob Cousy. That's just kind of a small inkling of what this thing is about. And then beyond that, I'm going to talk about my other projects as well, since I now have the floor. It's my gig, right? That I'm writing a book about an African-American man with whom I played basketball for many Sundays and other days. And it's the story of a Springfield person who was at one point in his life a crack cocaine addict and now has totally done a 180 and works with at-risk children. And it's the story of his life, both as a playground basketball sensation and as a person who went through quite a lot and is now giving back. And I've been writing the narrative to that. We have begun a film version of that, which I just hope that this gets done. It's obviously, this is nonfiction, but it's really important to me to get this out there. So those are 2 of the projects. I won't bore people further. Other questions?
I guess, would you say read your first one before Destiny? Do you think you have to do that?
Excuse me, Lindsay, what?
Would you say read your first book before Destiny?
Not necessary to do that. No. I mean, what I did with the first book was, in a sense, it was introducing Mendel and Morris. And I think it's funny. It's very, very kind of, it's local. It talks about their time as Forest Park shuffleboard players and the tournament they went to in Florida, where they met the Lewis sisters, Gilda and Zena. And it kind of comes back to Springfield. And it would probably be enriching for anybody to read that as kind of a warm up and or fuel for destiny. But I don't think it's a necessity. I think destiny stands by itself. Would you say so, Linda? That
Yeah, I agree that destiny definitely stands on its own. But I also I like the word that you used, enriching. You bring something to destiny if you have read Mendel and Morris, but it's not necessary. Yeah. And I think you really portray Mendel and Morris in destiny in a way that doesn't require you to have known them before.
yeah, I hope so. Lindsay, do you have any other questions? Oh, Tom has a question again. Good.
No, go ahead, ask around. I've gotten to ask a couple already.
I like how you described being inspired by people you meet. I'm not an author, so I don't think of how you come up with characters, but it's neat that you explained that it comes a lot of times from people you meet. So that was cool.
Yeah, well, some of the authors who are influences in my own life, fiction writers like John Updike and Flannery O'Connor, I learned early on to, in a sense, write about what you know and who you know, and then to create some kind of a constellation once you have that. So that's what I tried to do. Now, for the longest time, I thought to myself, I've had a lot of things in my life, but do I have enough to write? I don't have any multiple personality disorders as parent figures in my life, for example. I can't think of any tragic events. And I thought, what am I going to do? And then I thought, well, this is who I am. Somebody was at our house the other day who was kind of saying, it's not surprising that he's a craftsperson. And I thought to myself, well, it's not really all that surprising that I'm a storyteller. I think that, and Betsy will attest to this, that I'm pretty good at telling stories for people who are 5 years of age and under. I'm pretty funny about that. And then I think it loses its charm, at some point, say it maybe 7, 8, 9, maybe 6 is a point where it might work. But I thought to myself, yeah, I can create these stories. That's what I do. I'm a storyteller who hasn't really had enough space to tell the stories in longhand. I've been telling the stories, I could give many other examples about this, but again, my dad was a big storyteller. The stories that he told of the Second World War I don't think they were based on reality at all, but they, transfixed all kinds of people, especially me, because I was the only child in the household. And I suppose genetically I've carried that forward. And I'm glad I've carried that forward. I'm glad to have the opportunity to write some of them out at this point.
Hey, Fred, so, I was just thinking that this whole business of, writing novels has come to you a little later in life. And I think there's a lot of ideas in our culture that, if you're going to do something like that, you sort of have to discover your talent for it, when you're young, and that at some point you're just, the train has left the station, and a new venture like writing, finding your voice as a writer, is something that can't happen at a later age. I mean, you've written throughout your life, but this is a new kind of writing, and I have a feeling that you're getting to kind of express different kinds of things than you have in your writing before. And I'm just wondering if other people on the call might sort of wonder if they wanted to start writing about some things, whether they're memories or stories or ideas that they have. Like, what thoughts would you have for them about doing that?
My feeling is that within every one of us rests an artist, whether that side of a human being has been tapped or not. And so my answer is that, and in terms of writing, I really believe that everybody can write. And I discredit the conventional educational system for having put down some of our finest writers because they wouldn't write in the kind of boxes we have on our screens right now, and they kind of verged over the lines. And so the answer to the question is, I would encourage people in this age group to write. And it doesn't have to be structured writing. You know, as Peter Elbow said, writing without teachers, just grab your pen or pencil or get your tablet or get on your computer and write whatever you can write. You know, whether it be a reminiscence, memoirs kind of a thing, or a creative kind of piece. I think there's value in everything. I mean, as a longtime English instructor and theater instructor, I just encourage people to write all the time. And early on in a beginning drama class, I'd kind of say like, okay, you know, pair up and start writing a script. And people would go like, I don't know how to write a script. I can't write a script. What do you do? And I said, okay, you're two old friends from high school and you haven't seen each other in 20 years. Go ahead. Start writing, and then they'd come back and they'd say, well, we got 6 pages in 12 minutes. And, you know, my point is right there. You know, as I said, in my own case, I was lucky enough to have a couple of people, and I mentioned them somewhere in this book, in the acknowledgments or some other section, and I didn't say who they were, but one was my 8th grade English teacher, who said after I wrote a short story, like, come on, start writing books. And, you know, I'd say, well, can I bring my baseball glove? You know, was the answer to that, you know. And the other person who specifically said that was the chairperson of my doctoral committee in the mid 1970s. And as part of, I was in an innovative multidisciplinary doctoral program by choice. And as part of my final project, which was not a standard dissertation, I wrote a short novel. I wrote a 100-page novella. And she said, basically, you're writing better dialogue than most of the people in the country get going. And, you know, I was kind of like, I stopped in my tracks. It wasn't, you know, but I filed those positive responses. And I think if you can find that anybody in your life was positive to you as a writer, and if you didn't take my positive response right now, my encouragement that I believe that everybody can write. Some people write more quickly than other people. And there are different styles and different formula for writing. And, you know, that takes some time to figure out who you are and what you can do. Are you a poet? Are you a script writer? Are you a nonfiction writer? Do you want to write about the time when you were 15 or something like that? I just feel like, and I also feel like it's cathartic and sometimes even therapeutic to do that. At least I've found that, you know, it's really good for you to do that. Anybody who doesn't know me want to ask me a question? No.
Do you dedicate a certain amount of time each day, a time period, like in the morning an hour or the afternoon an hour, or do you do it whenever inspiration strikes?
I think the final of those three, but I will say that if I want to get, and this could be only 2 paragraphs, that I want to be productive every day in terms of my writing. And then sometimes it's way more than 2 paragraphs. But, and that can be revising. I mean, I didn't mention a gargantuan project. I haven't mentioned this to anybody that I'm working on, but I mean, that well, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's a major deal, and I want to get some work on that done every single day. And if I do, then I feel fine. It's kind of the days, aside from days when I'm, away from home or on a trip or something like that, which are few and far between these days, as everybody knows. But on the standard days when I'm home, I want to feel like I did X, Y, and Z, no matter how I'm feeling. And then I just kind of say, fine. Now, in a previous life, when I used to make a wonderful habit of interviewing people in the arts and some incredible writers, like William Styron and Ann Beattie and the poet Richard Wilbur, and August Wilson multiple times, the playwright. Many of them did follow the formula of like, I'm going to spend 3 hours every morning, even if I don't write anything. I'm going to sit in my study, and that's the way I do it. I need that kind of discipline. I actually write oftentimes these days on my iPad. And I don't know how I ever got to that, except that I can carry it around. And back in the days when you could go to a cafe and write, days no longer exist, I used to carry it with me and know that I'd get something done. Maybe this is a spinoff of August Wilson, who the playwright whom I interviewed a few times, and every time that I did, and I never thought I'd have props for this, but had his yellow legal pad with him. And he'd be sitting in a restaurant in New Haven. And when I walked in, and he finally sort of knew who I was, and he'd say, sit down, and he'd stop writing whatever he was writing. We would talk for a while, and by this way, this will be of interest to anybody who's interested in the arts. That I'd say, well, what are you doing? He'd go, well, did you listen to those guys sitting over there? And I'd go, oh, yeah. And then I'd say, yeah. And eventually I'd say, but how did you get that into a play? And he'd say, I don't know. I can't answer that one. That's in the stars. I don't know how you did that. And I said, but I want to know how to do that, because I want to do that. And he'd say, well, listen, man, just sit in the diner with me. Anyway, so I don't have that period in the morning or in the afternoon or the evening, that block of time, but I have this expectation of myself that I spend some time each day at the craft. Well,
If people haven't read your book yet, Fred, how can they get it?
Linda, should we mention the Odyssey first, or?
So I think, Lindsay, you had some books available, right? That you were taking. So why don't you answer that, and then we can talk about Odyssey.
Yeah, so we actually thank you to Faloka. They have purchased 3 copies, so 3 people today can win a copy. I did a random generator already for our participation list. Let's see, so Anne, who was commenting, she won a copy. Linda L, if you're there, she won a copy. And Tom, you won a copy. I don't know if you have a friend you want to give it to, if you already have a copy.
Well, is there someone else on the call who might like it? I'd be happy to give it to someone else in the community.
Okay. I think the other Murphy on the call could win too. So so those 3 people, I can get them a copy. And then if you are not a lucky winner, I'll let Linda explain how to get it.
So the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley is happy to take orders for Fred's book. And we'll be able to order it for you, and you can either pick it up there or they can ship it to you. So, and if you need a link, there's one on the Bella Storia Press website, there is a link to Odyssey if you click on Fred's book. So,
And if any seniors are watching the recording later on, you can always just email me and I can connect you with the right people to get you the book. All right. And a really big thank you to Fred and to Linda and to the guests today. We really appreciate your time, and this was fun for me, so I really appreciate you being here, and thank you.
Well, I had a great time, I have to say. It was not tons of people, but a lively group of people that I know and people that I don't know. And it was fun to be given the floor to kind of expound, talk for a while about the book and who I am and why I did it and everything else associated. So, well, thank you so much. It's great.
Thank you all for coming, and I'll send you all, or Linda and Fred, I'll send you a copy of the recording too.
Okay, great.
All right,
great. Thank you.
Bye everyone, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.